There we go. All right. So yeah, what does globalization in financial terms look like? Globalization in financial terms will generally mean you're opening up boundaries, uh, cheaper imports to different areas, establishing like establishing markets in other countries. So if we go down, oh, what happened? I must scroll down. Yeah, free flow of capital goods, multinational organizations, moving firms. Uh, exchange rate is the rate at which like the ratio one currency being exchanged for another in the global market. Shifts in exchange rates altering patterns of imports and exports. So let's take uh, let's say you have home country and you have foreign country. Uh, if home country's currency appreciates compared to foreign country, which means rel it's their currency is raising in value relatively to the foreign countries. Uh, you're going to have a larger influx of imports because people's money is worth more and they can buy more, but a reduction in exports since home country goods are now costing more for uh, foreign people to buy. So, and then inversely, if you have a depre if home currency depreciates depreciates compared to foreign currency, uh, exports, I mean, imports will decrease. The, the, uh, imports will decrease because people's money has less buying power, but exports will increase because it is now cheaper for people overseas to uh, buy things. Uh, what is it? True? Exchange rates can influence trade policy by causing people to like try and manipulate their exchange rate for advantage. Trade deficit. Trade deficit is when a country is exporting more than they're importing. Uh, our trade deficit showing like foreign capital inflows and investment in the U.S. The U.S. is constantly running a deficit because it uh, imports so much, and they're financing all of that importing uh, through loans and bonds that they're handing out. Uh, so because of this, leading to question four, because they're like lending out so much, there's become like a global dependence on the dollar in the global market. Everyone has it. It's like a relatively stable thing. Uh, like it holds its value very well. Yeah, the biggest banks hold it. Uh, biggest banks hold U.S. Treasury bonds as cash reserves. Basically, the entire economy relies on the U.S. to be in this deficit. Uh, how can global capital markets discipline or influence economic policy of governments? They can withdraw or buy loans or bonds or whatever. Uh, if a country, if somewhere that, if a group were do a mass like selling of all of their bonds, they could seriously cripple a country, causing them to have to pay for all the loans back. Possibly also force them to uh take out their own loans and try and pay them back, which would then uh those costs would then be put onto civilians in forms of like greater taxes or reduced public spending. Uh, emergency action the Federal Reserve undertake. Let me see. Uh, they did a lot of they did a lot of lending to like multiple different countries. They spent out like a lot more money into the market, into the global market. Uh, yeah, direct lending to large corporations, indirect lending to small corporations, swap lines in order to get more money out into the global economy, quantitative easing to reduce long-term interest rates. Uh, how does the status of the US dollar as a reserve currency of the global economy help the Federal Reserve to take dramatic steps during the pandemic to support the US economy? Uh, because the dollar is so valued, it allows the US Treasury, the Federal Reserve, to make these drastic measures because uh, everyone knows, like everyone has to rely on the dollar. So you just have to follow what the US wants to do, basically. Uh, this relates to hegemonic stability theory because the yeah. Mm, yeah, the US itself has now become the hegemon of the market, and with hegemonic stability theory, because of that one hegemon and so much power, no one really wants to compete. What do Fed's actions say about the cost and benefits of American hegemony in the global economy? So it does give them a lot of like flexibility in what they want to do, but there's also a huge free rider problem in America just like coasting along everyone else to like bail them out. All right, any questions on module 20? I'm going once. I'm going twice. Someone sent a message just to make sure chat is working. I'd be sad if it froze up already. Swap lines. This was kind of discussed in the thing. It was just like an easy swap lines were just like easy way to exchange dollars for foreign currencies. I'm gonna be going through 20 through 24 for now because I don't want to do like the economic stuff. But then I'll go back to other ones. All right, 21. Bretton Woods. Bretton Woods Economic Order was like the group made after World War II to try, like, I believe after World War II. And check, make sure. Yeah, yeah, there are organizations that were made to try and like post World War II to try and prevent another like Great Depression that was believed to be the cause of World War II. Main organizations that emerged were the GATT, which eventually became the WTO or World Trade Organization, and the IMF or International Monetary Fund. Uh, Main elements of international economic cooperation. You're going to see like lowering of trade barriers, coordination um, in the currency values, like making sure they appreciate or depreciate the same rate, so countries don't have advantages. Uh, Foreign aid and emergency lending to allies. Let's see, political cooperation is hard to achieve because, uh, yeah, people would just do anarchist actions. You don't know what people are going to do in the future. You don't know if you're going to hold up. Uh, you got to monitor compliance to make sure people are doing it all the time. Uh, Sometimes the distributional hurdles where one side is getting a better deal than the other. Uh, how might international economic organizations like the WTO and IMF facilitate economic cooperation among states and high levels? Uh, WTO and IMF, they provide enforcement mechanisms. I'll talk about that later. They reveal info about state interests to the other states so they know what's happening. They monitor compliance, and they do work to reduce distributional challenges. because actually I'll talk about that later. So what is the GATT? The GATT is the, let me read the acronym, the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trades. Of a multilateral organization designed to support the reduction of trade barriers on a reciprocal basis, blah, blah, blah. To provide the rules to create disputes and like negotiating grounds post-Cold War. This didn't exactly work as it was pretty weak and no actual enforcement. So later on, the GATT transformed into the WTO. So in the WTO, you have the judicial panel where people can file reports, and if they are successful, they are allowed to issue counter tariffs against the offenders. In the WTO, states also generally have equal say. So like big countries like the US can still be like tackled on by smaller countries who believe the US is performing unfairly. Was the IMF? The IMF is like the World Bank. It gives out like emergency lending, known as like the lender of last resort. Uh, let's see. Tries to preserve the exchange rate stability. Uh, so the IMF, whenever someone asks to lend, like asks to borrow money, the IMF can set up like conditions on its lending. So it's like you have to open up like your trade barriers more, and then we'll give you 20% of the money, and then you have to go make a deal with this country, and we'll give you 20% more. Uh, they're able to do this because they will lend when no one else will. Uh, the US has so much influence in the IMF because influence in the IMF is based off of contributions to the IMF funds, in which the US has the most of. All right, any questions on module 21, or we move on? Going once, going twice, going thrice. Yes, no, maybe so. All right, I am going to move on then. Just make sure, is chat working right now? Someone send a message. All right, that's good. Good. All right, module 22. Ooh. The environment and US foreign policy. What is the main I'm going to assume that you know what climate change does. I'm going to skip over it. What is the tragedy of the commons? Tragedy of the commons is when multiple people are like using a shared resource and like not really considering about like the full good, and they're kind of just abusing it. Yeah. It encourages like the overuse of common resources because people don't bear. Oh shit, it's replaying. What the fuck? Why can I pause it? That was a bit sussy. Uh, yeah, because people don't have to bear like the full like consequences of their actions, like polluting the air, they're more willing to just do whatever the hell they want. Play it again later, whenever I'm done. Uh, it's difficult because like it's very hard to restrict public goods like air. You can't just be like, oh, you're not allowed to use the air. Uh, externality, and externality is, I forgot. Give me a second and I will get that. If I can. An externality is a cost or benefit of some transaction by people not involved. Uh, collective action problem is a problem of trying to get people to all do something. basically. How might be applied to challenge of climate change. So everyone agrees that climate change is bad, but no one wants to do anything about it because it will hurt their economies in the short run. Uh, Political solutions to the collective action problem in case of carbon dioxide emissions. Let's go back here because I kind of forgot about this. So what is the point of externalities is the problem? Externalities go along with the tragedy of the commons. So uh, because it's like people so like the externalities are like the cost of some transaction for people not involved. So in the tragedy of the commons, you have uh externalities being made because people are like polluting the environment, but they don't bear the full cost of like global warming damaging like everywhere. Yeah, it's basically like free riding. It is like very, very similar to free riding. Free riding, you're just is like mostly you're doing nothing. Externality and tragedy of the commons is you're doing something and you're not caring about like the whole. So political solutions. So yeah, potential solutions are large actors providing a public good on their own. So like the US saying we're going to completely switch over to green energy to make up for everyone else because like they're like the main pollutants. International agreement to punish non-compliance. Uh, Markets undersupplying public goods to prevent more pollution or whatever. Blah blah blah. Well, the Paris Climate Accord. The Paris Climate Accord was a meeting in which people met up to set up their own nationally determined contributions for like for the goal of trying to reduce emissions down to 1.5 degrees Celsius per something by 20. They wanted to reduce global temperature increases below 2 degrees Celsius, 2 degrees Celsius with a goal of 1.5 degrees Celsius. Uh, Hopefully before 2025, I believe. Uh, what is it? These naturally determined contributions are uh that I forgot the word for. They're voluntary and non-binding. So people are just able to do their own goals. Uh um other than that. So it navigated the tension between developed and developing countries because so developing countries are still like way more reliant and will have a harder time getting out of non-renewable resources. So developed countries are forced to uh, transfer $100 billion to developing countries to help them pay costs of compensation, since developed countries have also been part of the problem. Uh, I realized I skipped 5. Redistributional struggles related to the problem of climate change. Number 1, developed versus developing countries. What I just said earlier. Then you also have what was it? You also have the generational distributional struggle because most of the people living right now will live to see the consequences, so they don't really give a shit. And the third one is renewable versus non-renewable, just trying to figure out what energy source is like the best or whatever. So yeah, main components like first climate accord, I just said it, the voluntary nationally determined contributions and the 100% money and $100 billion money transfer. which group of countries will be recipients of foreign aid? Developing countries. Is literally like the same question. Uh, national determined contribution. Voluntary, non-legally binding. Countries set their own goals to try and meet. Uh, it's supposed to work like naming shaming to try and like pressure other countries into following. Pros and cons. Pros. It's a broad collective agreement. It's voluntary, so people are more willing to do it. It helps address the needs of developing countries. It pressures other countries in trying to join. Cons. Uh, there's still challenges in like actually enforcing it. Countries aren't really like giving a shit. They're still like going on and making their own minds or whatever, not meeting their goals. The goals aren't high enough either. So they're not meeting their 2% and 2 degrees Celsius goal. Let's see. Obama's use of executive orders to the Paris Climate Accord. So because Obama used an executive order, it meant that in the future, the executive order could just be rescinded by the next president in line. Trump just really like made a presidential order to just basically override the old one, just tossing out that future President Biden reversed Trump's decision on plans. They can just make another presidential executive order. This makes it like really, really sketchy because other countries don't know if like the US could drop out at like any moment just because like a new president comes in like, nah, I hate climate change. Let's just like fucking not deal with it. According to Baker reading, what are the economic national security benefits of ambitious leadership? Uh, so uh, if the US leads, so like there was a concern by like Republicans that uh, climate change efforts are like wasteful of time and money and whatever. But Schultz and the other dude, Baker, are like, nah, it's actually really good. Uh, the first thing is that solving climate change will like reduce the need to spend money on like economic costs. Uh, you know, yeah, no. Yeah, reduce money needed like repair like natural disasters due to climate change. Uh, fosters economic growth because it's like more cost efficient. Uh, enhances national security because what I just said, the natural disaster shit. Uh, making like new so like the 4 pillars. I'm talking kind of shitty here, but the 4 pillars. Uh, economy-wide revenue neutral carbon fee, easier and cheaper to maintain than subsidies and regulations. Uh, let me see. The carbon fee would be returned back to American citizens, uh, which would lend support to the system. It replace environmental regulations, which would appeal to businesses that see the regulation as unfair. Uh, carbon tariff would be applied to energy intensive imports to level the playing field. So like other countries aren't getting an advantage. Any questions on that? I know I explained 13 kind of wonky. But yeah, any questions on module 22? Um, going once, going twice. Wait,
Hey,
national.
yeah, I'm just
Yeah.
gonna so I put down or on the notes it says not legally binding and voluntary, but what exactly is it?
What exactly is it? It's a state's like it is a state's decision to like it's a statement that we are going to try and get to like reduce our emissions down to X amount by here. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
All right. Any other questions for module 22 or are we moving on? Going once, going twice, going thrice. All right. Voluntary and forced migration. I hope you know this. I'm gonna skip over this. Like, this voluntary versus forced. Global pattern of international migration. People are generally migrating from like developing countries to developed countries. Countries with the largest inflows of international migration, large inflows of refugees. I'm just gonna pull up the thing right here. Where is it? I am blind. Oh wow, it got deleted. Ooh, that's not good. Let's see if we can recover that. Uh, so top international migration receiving countries from greatest to least are USA, Saudi Arabia, Germany, Russian Federation, United Kingdom, United Arab Emirates, France, Canada, Australia, and Spain. The top refugee countries in order of greatest to least are Turkey, Lebanon, Iran, Uganda, Ethiopia, Jordan, Germany, DRC, and Kenya. Blah blah blah. Hopefully you won't need to know that for the test because kind of a bullshit question, probably. Gap in public opinion between preferred levels of immigration policies. Collective action problem. You have to get people like have opinions on immigration policies, but not enough people are like rallying others to vote for change. So uh, democracies like leaders are just doing whatever the hell they want to do. Immigration policy related to partisanship. Republicans, immigration bad, hurt job. Uh, fucking forgot the name. Democrats, ooh, immigration good, help economy. Oops, where the hell did I scroll? Yeah. Uh, how is international migration a part of the broader phenomenon of globalization? How does international flow of labor do international migration create winners and losers in domestic economies? So you're going to have the home country, let's say that's US, and you're going to have the foreign country, which is like India, okay? So whenever of someone from India, uh, whenever someone from India migrates to the US for like a tech job, the US is gaining because like they want like all the smart people because they have like a monopoly on that. So everyone wants to go there and it just grows it more and more. Uh, Meanwhile, India is receiving India is going through a brain drain as all the smart people leave the country. So there's not a lot of smart people left to like do, I guess, smart people shit. Uh, and then another example, let's take US is home and Mexico is foreign. Uh, let's see, Mexican migrates to the US for like a, actually no, a Mexican migrates to the US and like takes a manufacturing job. Uh, People like that that this yeah, give me 1 second. So yeah, let's say you have an influx of like unskilled workers coming in to do like unskilled jobs. That business is already like small, like smaller quantity in the US, so it's hurting that even more. But yeah. Uh, what are remittances? What are remittances? Remittances are when migrants send money back to their like people in their home country, usually like their family. I mean, you're sending money from a wealthy country to a poorer one. What more could you say? Weren't you reading how does international migration affect the demographic composition of countries? I mean, migration changes if more people from like China migrate to the US and the US is going to be more Chinese. Uh, creates demographic changes create conflict within countries of issue and national identity. Uh, it hurts people's like little egos about like being dominant race or whatever. Social status too. Politicians have to try and appeal to like different voters or like different backgrounds. Uh, yeah, more cultures, more languages. Some people don't like that because they're like a little bit stinky. Yeah, all stinky poo-poos. Yeah, as you can see, I use very good terms. How does international migration intersect with national security? Uh, I mean, international migration leads the way to terrorist groups possibly attacking or information leaking out. Yeah, can't trust the loyalty. Uh, but uh, also, I will keep on saying also because I need to check. It brings resources to like grow stronger alliances with other countries to better bolster national security. All right, anything for module 23? The more migrants in the manufacturing communities or wages, does that mean less countries are employed versus overseas? Uh, think about that for a second. I think not necessarily because another advantage of like overseas, like of employing workers overseas is that they're also a lot closer to like other manufacturing plants and resources that might not be available in the US. I think they can affect each other slightly, but it's like two different phenomenons from my understanding. Don't quote me on this 100%. Any other questions for module 23? I don't see anything else. Mod 24. Uh, how do different measures such as national GDP, average income, GDP per capita, and average rate of economic growth influence which countries are perceived as economically powerful and prosperous in the global economy? By national GDP, uh, China is like zonked out. They are like cruising. They're making so much money. By average income, I believe it's like US and Europe. Because like China has a lot of people. So like divided up between all citizens, it's not as much per capita. And then by growth, it would be like China, India, because they've had like major boom and economic growth. Which countries or regions have the most national wealth? Uh, America, Europe, some Russia, some of Germany, uh, tiny bits of Asian countries. Uh, I wrote this down on the thing. Yeah, most national wealth: U.S., China, Japan, Germany, France, UK. Highest GDP capita: U.S., Norway, Ireland, Switzerland. Economic growth: China, India, whatever how big companies are. Uh, extreme and moderate poverty. Extreme poverty, less than $1.90 USD per day. 10% live under extreme poverty. Moderate poverty, less than $3.10, 3.10 USD per day. 28% live in moderate poverty. Most of the poverty is in Africa, although poverty rates have decreased substantially since the end of the Cold War, from 35% in 1990 to below 20% in 2008, with a lot of that being due to like the massive economic growth in China and India. You can read that yourself. Uh, why is alleviating global poverty so important? Global poverty leads to a bunch of other problems, which are listed like later, like lower life expectancy, poor education, blah 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 blah. Uh, because people are like broke, they have to rely on like substance farming and stuff. So like substance farming, that means they can focus on like getting education, which would mean a better job, which means more like money opportunities. So the economy can grow. What is foreign aid? When people give money to a foreign country. Ooh, wow, amazing. How does the amount of foreign aid provided by the United States compare with contributions from other wealthy countries? Uh, the US technically gives out like the most money, but it's barely a percent of their national, like their actual like national gross income. Uh, US targets foreign aid mainly to like mainly economic aid, somewhat military aid. They focus their financial aid, foreign aid, on key countries in Afghanistan, and Israel, Jordan, Egypt, and Iraq, mainly to help like bolster like alliances. Why does foreign aid work better to alleviate global poverty? Multiple reasons. Uh, the world's richest countries don't supply enough. Freaking US gives chump change compared to how much they make. Receiving states don't use their foreign aid effectively. People can be corrupt and like I don't know, like prime minister or whatever can like buy a fucking mansion, or whatever the hell. Donor countries can just not direct the funds correctly as well. When countries give foreign aid at all, doesn't really seem to help them as much. Generally just like make them look good in front of the crowds. Uh, cheaper than alternatives of keeping things in control. Help like build alliances. So, any questions for 24?
There was a question on the quiz, and I think you just said something like it, but I didn't really hear. It was about the amount of foreign aid the US gives to other countries to low income countries or like less developed countries compared to other more developed countries? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Kinda, kinda.
Well, my question is like what the answer to that one on the quiz was. It was like the US gives more money to um the less developed countries in raw dollars, but GDP wise it gives less or something like that. Yeah, someone said it in the chat.
Yeah.
Is
They
that
get,
the answer? Or is that the question?
I assume it was like I assume that question was like a yes or no. Yeah. The
Okay,
answer? Yeah.
okay, thanks.
All right. Anything else on module 24? Going once, going twice, going thrice. All right. Let's see what people would ask about. INN at UT. I can go over it if you want. Yeah, I think someone had requested like 17. It should be. I'll do the INNs. COP26. I'll start with the INNs. COP26 was an annual meeting between a bunch of countries to try and just figure out global emissions. It was considered like a do or die moment. Because like if they didn't act now, then we could be facing like a severe global climate disaster. Ooh, scary, spooky. Yeah, it's a pivotal attempt to do their last action. Uh, Especially since like the Paris Climate Accord wasn't going up to people's standards. Uh, where we see pre uh emissions were better than the projected pre-Paris climate deal, although current national policies were still above uh were still above the 2% rate and even above their pledged emission rates and highly above the 1.5 target. The the three takeaways. Climate change is a scientific fact, is unavoidable for the next 30 years, and there's a short window of opportunity to avoid climate change catastrophe. Our international agreement on climate change work. Uh, right now it's just like voluntary. So yeah, right now it's voluntary. So some people are just free riding or not meeting their goals, but it's like empowering others, like pressure other countries like do their shit. It was kind of effective, but not effective enough. Or an Atom 2s when we then move the global economy from fossil fuels to renewable energy. Electricity generation, transport, industry, housing, agriculture is technically feasible. It's like not so expensive. It's expensive, but not like so expensive that it's like completely out of our league. And promotes economic growth in like new sectors. Problems that complicate global climate change. Like, global attempts to take more aggressive action to control climate change. Uh, you have like, a bunch of climate deniers. You have people like Trump drawing out of the Paris Climate Accord. China and Russia are not present. Tension between richer and poorer countries due to like the distributional issues. Renewables are also not ready to replace fossil fuels. Any questions on INN at UT number 5? Going once. Going twice. Going thrice. All right, we're going on to the next one. Is chat frozen? Someone send a message. Nope. Oh my God, we are blessed today. INN6. Crisis involving migrants. Let's see. US and this one's kind of funky. I don't like this one. So right now, uh, US and EU are like putting sanctions on like Belarus for like being all sussy. And Belarus is like, nah, we're gonna like send some migrants over. They're gonna promise them access into Poland with like passports, everything, but then leave them stuck inside like the area in between the border to kind of like freezing up and dying in there. Oh wait, I'll explain that later, Tucker. After I'm back done with this. So yeah, Belarus is being supported by Russia to try and like fight against American democracy promotion. The difference regime type is fueled the conflict with Belarus and EU. Belarus is like the last remaining dictator. Well, Lukashenko is the last remaining dictator. He's remained that way to like voter fraud. Uh, the the EU sees Belarus as a threat to try and like take down democracy. Uh, the Lukashenko sees the EU as trying to like create a political uprising of democracy in Belarus. Uh, I think, what role? So Lukashenko did make a threat that he's going to cut off the gas lines to EU if they don't like leave the sanctions down. And see, little Vladdy boy here was like super supportive of Lukashenko because like he has his own agenda. But then Vlad like Putin's all like, hey, wait, I never gave you permission for that. They're going a bit too far. They're going a bit sussy. If I do say so myself. So yeah, what is mass migration from war-torn countries like India, Afghanistan, and Syria? Transitility in European democracies and exacerbate conflict between the political right and left between countries. As I see of previous immigration policies and Brexit. The Brexit factor into this dynamic. What did I write? So yeah, there was a legacy of Brexit existing basically due to uh, like struggles over immigration policy. The right wants more restrictions while the left wishes to keep borders open, just like in the US. So there's that whole like dynamic happening. Strategic, that strategic concerns of the US in this crisis. Uh, there's worries of military conflict breaking out at the border, resulting in enactment of Article 5 in the NATO treaty, which means like actual fighting if fighting is bad. Worries of increase in Russian intervention, Ukrainian civil war. So like while all this shit's happening with like Lukashenko and uh Belarus, Russia's also just doing shit in Ukrainian civil war, trying to retake land, just like they did with that other thing that we talked about before that I forgot already. Yeah, and the refugee crisis is kind of like a theorized to be some larger Russian plan to destabilize the EU. Any questions on INN at UT number 6? 1, 2, 3. All right. Could you explain the trade tariffs and how to decrease globalization? Tariffs. That was a thing. I mean, in general, with tariffs, I mean, of course, like you're making it harder to trade, which is protecting like the home economies in a country from having to compete with like foreign countries, but it's also just making it harder like to have the full like global economy that people want to have. Uh, does that kind of answer your question, Tucker? I'm not sure how specific you want me to go with it. Is chat frozen as well? Oh, good. Chat is not frozen. All right. Does anyone want specifically anything from 17, 18, or 19? Or can we, what do we want to call it? So yeah, if you want to go over, me to go over 17, 18, or 19, quick review of them all. I'll go through like super quick on 17, 18, and 19 because it's kind of long. 17. I hope you know what institutions are. I'm skipping that. Ding ding ding. Understand to give. International institutions are the rules. Question 2 and 4 for 17. International institutions are the rules. Uh, uh, that yeah, they're like the rules that organizations set to try and like restrain power and make sure everything's like fine and dandy, whatever the hell. Examples. Up on. Let me scroll back up here. Ding dong. Oh, I don't know, got an up dog in here. Yeah, it's like creates incentives and punishments to influence behaviors, creates norms for people to follow. So it's like someone's acting a little sus, people can call them out. Recognition of sovereignty to like confirm power. Uh, Questions for trade-offs. So while you're like in this big national group and like you're getting support of like other countries, you're also just trading your sovereignty, and people don't like that, and people hate it whenever you're like donating to like focusing too much on this, uh, like take for example, you're like dumping a bunch of money and time into international organizations, like international institutions, and then people are getting mad that like why are you spending more money on the US instead? Bum, bum. Number 7, interstate cooperation. Interstate cooperation. How does state lower their sovereignty? By joining an international organization, you kind of just have to like give up some of your power because they're not like the fucking big head honcho in that shit. So like as a you need like these like collective decisions as a group between multiple states versus just one state. So yeah, multiple states are like lowering their sovereignty to establish rules and create policy adjustment. So like they're getting together, they're making all these rules to be like, we all have to agree to this, and no one can like step out. But like problems with dealing this can be like collective action problem, free riding, not fulfilling requests, transition costs. There being winners and losers in certain transactions as well. Two main political bodies of the UN. You have like the main council, which is like all the winners of World War II. So that's like US, France, Russia, EU, and like one other fucker. I forgot. Da-da-da-da-dum. Yeah, Security Council, US, UK, China, Russia, France. And then like 10 other rotating members, they have like the big guns. And then the other part, which is like everyone else. UN participate, the US appear, the US participates in the UN because it gives legitimacy to their actions. Because like if they do something on themselves, it's kind of like whatever. But they get approval from like all the other big countries, people are more likely to agree to it. Cold War origins. NATO was made to make sure Russia didn't invade Europe. Uh, America had like a presence in Europe and also like bind their like their power so they didn't abuse it and make sure Germans didn't rise up again. Two dilemmas facing NATO. Uh, the EU isn't doing enough shit. They're kind of slacking off for free riding. And how much are we actually benefiting from it? Trump administration is like, now we're gonna fucking pull out. If you don't do your shit, we're not gonna do our shit either. All right. Any questions on 17? Going once, going twice, going thrice. Is chat frozen? Hooray. We're almost done. All right, what is democracy? Democracy, I hope you know that. Uh, three procedural minimal conditions of democracy. Number one, uh, you have to be able to vote. Number two, everyone must have equal representation. Number three, the state must have sovereignty, like actual like power to do shit. Explain how restriction on voting rights affect the American democracy. Of course, like with less representation, you're not getting like the full democratic experience. Uh, you have first expansion of from all like only rich white males to all white males. Then you have all black males too. Then you have women. Then you have actually like no more racism. Then you have reduction of age from 21 to 18. Of course, with more people in the voter base, there's like more representation from like different people who want like, different things. Like female voters generally want like a female representative more. Democratic peace theory, people think that like being democratic and trying to establish democracy results in peace. Uh, electoral, because people have to be elected, it makes constraints on like their decisions, not to do anything drastic. Checks and balances hold people accountable and prevents them from doing anything drastic as well. And also, democracies just generally don't want to fight with each other. Critiques is that number one, scrolling down, doing my scrolling down song. Democratic transition can result in like small waves of damage to a country. And then also there are other explanations for like the peace instead of democratic stability, like democratic peace, I mean, such as like a shared enemy after World War One. Yeah, World War Two. Efforts. Skip 5 because 6 talks about it too. Efforts by U.S. democracy. Woodrow Wilson promoted, like spearheaded democracy and self-determination. Post Cold War was like huge American, we're cool as hell, become democratic era. Bush and Obama administrations were trying to push for democracy to try and like prevent more terrorist uprisings in the Middle East. Let me see. And then there's also like the pullbacks of during the Cold War, the US is just trying to get like as many allies as possible, even if some people weren't democratic. And then Trump's also like pulling out of American democracy just to do America first. Waves of democracy. Number one. Uh, this is post World War One. No, pre World War One. More democracies in the U.S. and like Europe and stuff. Second wave, post World War Two. More democracy in Europe. More in Japan. Late 1970s. More in like Europe. More in Latin America. Krasner reading maintain these tendencies within for democracy promotion. Number one, we're going balls to the wall. We are Americans. We love democracy. Number two is like, we're just not gonna like hand on each other abroad. We're just gonna show you how good democracy is by being a nice little stable country. Krasner believes we should focus on making sure, like, we should focus on like, keeping good enough governments, even if they're not democracies, if they're good enough, we shouldn't really care. All right, anything for number 18, like bottom 18, or are we moving on? Checking chat to see if it froze. Krasner, yeah. Krasner is like wants like a combination of the two, kind of like we should like at least attempt to promote democracy, but like if it's fine as it is, we shouldn't like, deal with it too much. Like it's good enough, yeah. China trade war, that is next module, so I'll go over that. So anything else on 18 or we are done? All right, 19. Chief indicators, increase of globalization, more GDP in the global economy. What comparative advantage? If I have group, you have country A, country B, resource B, resource C, resource D. If country A can produce resource C better, and country B can produce resource D better, they should focus on their own thing and then sell it to the other for just general increased profits. Blah blah blah. Trade contributes to economic sources of order in the international system, like feeding system and specialization, trade agreements in order to facilitate the greatest economic gain between countries. Blah, blah, blah. The Cardi model, basically same thing. Specialization makes good economy. Woo, we love money. I mean, I just talked about that. You just read the definition if you need it. Lol. Lol. Ah. Da, da, da. Trade makes states wealthier, widespread political resistance, globalization, to protect the little small, low skill manufacturing plants. You have like these low skill ones, but then people don't like expand globalization because then that opens economy up to global markets, which make compete better and hurt the domestic firms. What I just said, basically, for which groups win. Big tech wins a lot. Wow. Yeah, big tech wins a lot. Wow. Low skill firms lose out. Trade and globalization, shape political relationships and order in the international system. People want to be able to coordinate. They set up institutions. They lower trade barriers, coordinate monetary policies, blah blah blah, shit like that. Read about it. Why did U.S. launch a trade war against China in 2018? China's Trump's focusing on America first, and China is kind of abusing their currency being lower in value than the US to make their exports much more promising. So US is kind of like, nah, we don't like it. We launch like a major tariff. We're leading into number 7, major steps. US placed a tariff on Chinese products. China placed a tariff on products coming from Trump's voter base, like soybeans which are sold like that, like mainly just in China. Multiple rounds of tariffs increasing. It's getting worse and worse. Eventual phase 1 deal to lower tariffs, but it's kind of been fucked over because China isn't holding its end of the deal and all COVID shenanigans happened. Political considerations. Trump's like Trump first. Also, China has government systems that help control the economy while the US doesn't. All right, any other questions in general? Is chat frozen as well? How confident am I? I am 90% confident. I am never 100%. Let me see, watch this. Will it work? I am materializing into the real world. Hello. Hold up, where's my frog? You know, fucking. Let me turn off the virtual background. Maybe I can see it, but none. There's a for the frog. Okay. All right. That will be all. Good luck on the test tomorrow. Go to sleep, losers.